Eduarda, and in this video series, I'm going to share with you my experience of healing with the help of Love Addicts, which is an online therapeutical program specifically designed for people living with anxious, insecure attachment. A little disclaimer before I begin: Love Addicts isn't sponsoring these videos, and I won't be sharing the contents of the program here. The only purpose of this video series is to share my experience and connect with other people that are also on a healing journey. If you struggle with anxious, insecure attachment, you are not alone. And I hope that my experience can be of some use to you. Okay, let's go. Okay, so by week 4, because I had already had this major shift in perception and had become more aware of myself and kinder to myself, things started looking up a little bit. And more than ever, I just valued all of the content in Love Addicts like so much that I decided to change my routine around and start watching the videos in the morning. So instead of going to bed early, I was getting up early, would sit at my desk and watch the videos and then take notes. And at this point, I didn't know exactly like how to best take notes because obviously there is an aspect of writing things down which has the purpose of helping you assimilate and memorize information. But what I really wanted to do was take notes that I could easily refer back to in a time of need. I was like, okay, at one point, I'm gonna be getting back in touch with my ex, um, possibly be getting in touch with my dad. Um, I know like the more I heal this, the better it can be in my relationship with my mom. And I wanted to make sure that um, when I was in those situations or any new situation, because at that point I was also studying. So I was thinking, okay, like surely when I go into work after this, because I did sort of a career transition, and the idea was to take this very intensive course and then go into a new line of employment after that. So I'm like, I'm going to be working probably in a big company. I'm going to be working in a team. Like, there's certainly going to be like egos and characters and my own ego and my own character. So, like, I want to be ready for all of this. And at that point, I was like, okay, also, worst comes to worst, once I get back in touch with my ex, if like they don't want to, like, um, they're not interested in restarting anything, eventually I'm going to be starting a new relationship, and I definitely, most definitely, wanted to be ready for a new romantic relationship. I did hope that I would have a new romantic relationship with my ex where we would be like starting things over. But if that didn't happen, I was like already kind of like getting myself ready for starting something brand new with someone that's also brand new. But I knew that I was going to be taking myself, my old self, and my anxious attachment into whatever new relationship I had. And I was just like, I cannot and I will not continue living like this. So in week 4, I began taking notes like obsessively. By obsessively, I mean that like I would start watching one of the videos in the courses and I would pause it maybe like after 30 seconds, a minute. And I would write paragraphs and paragraphs and paragraphs just on that one like little bit of video that I had watched, because I was like, oh my God, there's so much information here. Okay, so if this happens, then this is um, my reaction, these are other normal reactions, this is what's happening in my psyche. I was like dissecting every little thing that was said in the courses. Also, at this point, I had begun the courses all over again. So instead of moving on, I started at the beginning again to take like this very, 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 very detailed notes. And I did that throughout, I think, week four, maybe a little bit beyond. I don't remember exactly, but I did do it for at least one whole week. And I was spending hours doing this because I was rewatching all the videos I had already watched. I was looking at my old notes. I was looking through my journal, and I was taking detailed notes of everything that was said. On top of that, I began creating like what I called at the time cheat sheets, which was like trigger, reaction, response. So it was a list of like all the common triggers that can happen in relationships. And again, this is like all relationships, not only romantic. I had a focus on like romantic relationships, but I also had like triggers in other relationships and situations. And I would have like, okay, this is the trigger. This is the normal reaction for like, these are the normal reactions for anxious attachment. These are my normal reactions in a situation like that. This is what's going on in my head when this is happening. These are all the misconceptions, all the negative beliefs that I am bringing in because of anxious attachment. um this is the reality. Like I had like a reality check section, and then this is a secure mature response. So I had broken down like all situations that could happen, that I could imagine, that I had lived through, or that were being mentioned in the courses as examples. And not only was I taking like those obsessive detailed notes, but I was actually doing this cheat sheets where I could say, in the future, if I'm feeling triggered, I could go find a trigger on my list and then go, okay, this is what's happening. This is where anxious attachment is coming in. This is where I am not looking at this as it is. Because I guess my biggest conclusion by week four, and still to this day, is anxious attachment will like put a lens over your eyes and you see things a little bit distorted, not quite like as they are. You tend to judge a lot, judge people, judge situations, and put a lot of weight on them, and make a lot of assumptions about what other people are doing and thinking, make a lot of predictions of the future, like you're sure like horrible things are going to happen or someone's going to betray you, all of that. So when you have the anxious attachment lens on, you're not really seeing people and situations for what they really are. And that was like, that became a big, big concern for me. It was like, okay, when I'm triggered, I need something that brings me back to earth so I can go like, okay, this is what is actually happening. These are the facts. These are all the stories I've created in my mind. Separate fact from story, which I think is like one of the biggest things that I've learned. I've learned so much in this program, but like being faced with the situation, going like, okay, I'm really, really triggered, offended, annoyed, whatever it is, but what are the facts? Beyond all these stories in my head about how this person is this or is doing that or has no consideration for me, like beyond all of that, what are the facts of what is happening here? And that has helped me deal with situations a lot better. So by week four, I had already realized that I had this lens on, the anxious attachment lens on, and I wasn't confident that I could always ground myself fast enough to come to a mature, responsible response to whatever was happening. I was like, I need to have something that I can go back to and that will guide me. So I started making this very extensive cheat sheet, and I was doing this in an app called Notion. So I was using like all these tools, and you had like the triggers, and then you clicked on it, and then like a little drop down menu opened, and it was like, okay, what are the details of this situation? And then like, okay, if this, then that, and then press here. Like you could like go on the cheat sheet and press like all these different little buttons, and it would open up with like reality check, asking me like, okay, if you're in this situation right now, what are the facts? And here is a secure, like mature response that you can have to the situation. And this is how you tend to your feelings as you're doing that. I'm not going to say like it was something bad to take notes and to do the cheat sheets, because I did memorize a lot of this information. I did internalize a lot of this information. But first of all, it was taking up too much of my time. At one point, I was even like slacking a little bit on the course that I was on, because I was like so much more interested in um, writing these things down, because it made me feel so safe, right? And at one point, it became really, really exhausting. And I was like, oh, anxious, insecure attachment. Like it was so vividly there in that process. It's like I am using all of the energy my anxiety gives me to produce all these notes and all these cheat sheets so I can keep my insecurity kind of like under control. So I started in week 4 realizing that, or how I made things so much harder for myself than they needed to be. Now, this is something that I've always known that I do, because I had family members tell me this. I've had people that I've dated tell me this. It's like, why are you making things so hard? Like, why are you making things so intense? Like, why are you working so hard? And I can be sometimes such a perfectionist and such a hard worker, and I can give so much of myself to something to the point of exhaustion, of burnout. And I never, like, I'll tell you this much, like, I never get amazing results from it. Like, I might get okay results from something because I put so much energy into it and so much work into it. And because I'm like there, like in the details, like wanting everything to be perfect. And that will sometimes like bring some rewards, but they're never amazing rewards. And more often than not, I burn out and I don't finish things, or I end up like giving up, or like even like hating things that I initially loved, because I pushed myself so, so hard, wanting to be so thorough and precise. And for the first time, as I was taking these notes and doing the cheat sheets, I was like on my computer. It was like in the moment I realized that I'm like just typing away and watching the videos and flipping through like, like screens on my computer. If you looked at me, I would look like a mad woman, like, and it was just like, oh, this is what I do. And at that moment, I was like, because I feel so, 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 so incredibly insecure. Like it's even hard to put into words like the level of insecurity that I can feel. And I imagine a lot of people out there feel the same way or even worse. But it's, you feel so unsafe and so defenseless. Then the anxiety kicks in and is like, do, do, do. The more you do, the more you prepare, the safer you can be. And you do it and you put a lot of energy into it, because there's this other part of you that is like, I'm not safe, I'm not safe, I'm not safe. And then this other part is like, don't worry, don't worry, we're doing things to be safe. It's like, okay, do more because I still don't feel safe. Okay, I'm doing more. And it's like, it just never ends. It's just like you get into this snowball of anxiety and insecurity, and it will turn into an avalanche, and it will destroy things if you let it. If anything, it will destroy your health. And again, I've always known this about myself, that I'm like a bit intense, but then it was like, oh, okay, I'm a bit intense because I feel unsafe. And then my anxiety gets triggered. And then I got to go on a journey to ask, like, but why do I feel so unsafe? Because there was nothing at that time in my life or in my past that justified the level of insecurity that I felt. Obviously, like everyone, I've lived a life and I had ups and downs and I had things happen to me. And some of those things were difficult or sad or um, at points even like unsafe and dangerous. But nothing that big. Like I've never been through a major trauma, like a huge, like never been in an accident, never been like in a situation where I was completely out of control. And so I was like, okay, this is definitely like a psychological insecurity. This is like a perceived danger that I've been running away from like my whole life. And but what is the danger? Like now that I know that I'm insecure, like how can I get in touch with what my fears actually are? And where did they come from? Where did I pick up this idea that I just wasn't safe? So this was obviously not something that I like resolved in that same week. I just came to this conclusion in week 4. And wow, like how like mind opening and heart opening that is to go like, okay, like I've been kinder to myself, taking better care of myself and my emotions. If you remember from my other video, like since week 3. But then in week 4 is where I get to go like, I actually need to take a lot more care of myself because there is a part of me that is completely terrified and I need to address that. So, like, aside from addressing all my other emotions about everything that is happening right now in my life, I need to address this ongoing fear, like paralyzing fear, or in my case, it was at some points paralyzing because I would burn out and then I would not want to go back to things, you know. So that's like I've changed like jobs and careers so many times. I've moved a lot. I've gone to new places because those are all things that kind of like make you sort of like reboot when you burn out from something else. So you have to like sort of abandon whatever you burned out with and start something new. So I've always been starting new things, which I think I made the best out of it. But like I was like, no, like I want change. I want to actually stick with the things that I'm doing now, and I want to be consistent over being um so intense, because intensity would only last you so much, as where consistency is more of like an every like one step at a time, and you build something quite nice without, hopefully without burning yourself out. So I was like, okay, like that part of me needs a lot of attention, but at this point in week 4 I didn't really know what to do with that. And but I already trusted the program to a level that I was like, okay, I don't really know what to do with this, but I know that if I keep coming back to the courses, keep coming back to the community, sharing, I can then eventually get to the core of this. Um, my core need from week 4, once I realized this, was to look within. And I didn't realize this at that time, but it was to start to look at shadow. So if you're familiar with like shadow work and like the shadow of the psyche, I don't know like all the right terms, but it's basically looking at all the darkness that you have inside of you. I didn't know that once I looked into all my insecurities, that I would have to look into like parts of myself that I'm not comfortable with, and also look at like events in my past that I kind of don't want to remember. And some of the things I realized like I had completely like erased from my mind. Like it was there, but I didn't think about it. And I kind of had to bring those things to light. So I didn't know that that's what this would mean. And this has been like an ongoing journey. I'm still going through it weeks later. But week 4 of Love Addicts is when I woke up to this. I was like, I had not only understood anxious attachment so well, but I had seen exactly how it manifested for me. Obviously, depending on the situation that I'm on, if it's a romantic relationship, if it's a problem at work, or if it's something else, I will have like slightly different reactions, or at least outside, they look like they are slightly different reactions. But what I realized is that the actual mechanism of my anxious attachment specifically is that insecurity gets triggered first. Something happens that makes me feel really, really insecure. That insecurity then triggers memories from my past where I find evidence that I've been in dangerous or uncomfortable situations before and it could happen again. And then once my insecurity finds that evidence in my past memories, it then projects fantasies of the future where bad things can happen again. And then that becomes a loop of fear and insecurity and paranoia almost. And you wouldn't think so. Like, I am pretty, like, I guess, as I'm always described and how I mentioned in this video, like intense. But I think, like, to most people, I just look like a slightly nervous person. But inside, it's like, it's even more intense. It's like the nervousness is like a paranoia, and that's why like I tend to have like trouble sleeping. I'm very watchful of everything that's happening around me. I'm like trying to anticipate everyone's next step so I'm not surprised. I hate being surprised in situations like this where you're like, all of a sudden you have something really unpleasant come at you. So I'm always like anticipating situations and what other people might be thinking and doing, and how I can, like, at the very least, if I can stop a situation, I want to not be surprised by it. And that insecurity loop then triggers the anxiety. Now, when anxiety gets triggered, that's when all the nervous energy comes out, the erratic energy, where I start overdoing things, where I make myself really busy with um, doing anything that I can to prepare and to, um, how do I explain this? It's like, it can manifest in like crazy ways. So, like, if I might be, for example, scared that my rent is going to go up, and I can then find evidence of like, yeah, like that's possible. Like my rent has gone up other times and it's very likely like it will go up and I don't know by how much. And then will I have enough money? And then I get into that insecurity loop. But then how my anxiety will manifest is that I will start like talking about it. So like I'll talk about it with maybe my agent and my flatmates, and like I'll start wanting to take care of that problem. But I'll also start like overdoing it in other areas. So I'm like, okay, maybe I need a new job. I need to change my jobs. Like I need a higher salary. So like I might be like doing my work and studying, which I'm usually like both working and studying. And then I'll like start looking for like other jobs. And this is usually the moment where I might like all of a sudden make a career change, because I'm like, I need to earn more, or I need to have a different lifestyle, or I need to move somewhere. And then I'll like make a shift or like a big change. I'll like move to a new city. I'll um, move companies. I'll start a new job. I'll change the course of my life completely. And it all started with the insecurity that might have been triggered by my rent possibly going up. So that's how I notice it happens to me, for me. And sometimes you can have several things happen at the same time. So you can have like, oh, my rent might be going up. Oh, my partner might betray me. Oh, I don't know, like my dog could run away, like, and all of those insecurities will then trigger the anxiety, which is like, okay, so you know, let's make more money. What do we need to do to make more money? Study more, and then apply for new jobs, and then train the dog because the dog needs to learn how to cross the street by itself in case it runs away. And then, like, let's put like three tags on the dog so like no matter who finds the dog, if it runs away, it will come back to us. And let's, talk to the insurance company that where we have pet insurance to make sure that like we're covered for expenses if we have to look for the, like, it can get pretty crazy. And then all of a sudden you're doing things that you don't need to do because these situations aren't happening. And even if they are like possibly happening in the future, there are like much better solutions to this. But your anxiety makes you go like the extra mile. So like you're going like 20 extra miles ahead of yourself and life and everyone else, just in case your fears become reality. And then you end up with, in the case of relationships, thankfully not the rest of the stuff, although it could happen also, but especially in relationships and especially in romantic relationships, if you're like, oh, in the middle of all this, like my partner is acting weird and they're going to betray me, or I don't like this that they did, and then you start lashing out at your partner and you're like expressing, you don't know how to express yourself, right? Like, because you don't know, like, at least for me, it was very unconscious. Like, I didn't realize I was that insecure. I didn't realize that my insecurity was triggering my anxiety. And I didn't realize my anxiety was making me do things that I didn't need to do, that was possibly like driving other people crazy. And, um, and then all of a sudden you're lashing out at your partner. It might be like something very small, like they didn't do, I don't know, like they didn't do their cleaning this week yet, or, um, you feel like, they're you're feeling disconnected from them, and it's surely because they don't love you anymore or something like that. Those are the things that will happen in an anxious attached mind. and and then all of a sudden you're having fights, you're picking fights, and you don't even know what you're fighting about. At one point you're driving this other person completely insane, you're driving yourself completely insane, everyone is getting hurt, and you kind of end up in a self fulfilled prophecy, or at least I do, where thankfully not all the things that I'm afraid of happen. Like, my dogs are always okay. I am always able to deal with my rent increase, like I get by. But then often in the middle of that, I might lose a partner because all of a sudden there's a breakup because I've been essentially putting all of my insecurity and anxiety into imaginary problems that I've created for the relationship, and just like driving this person insane. Or I might lose a friendship because I wasn't attentive, or um, because I didn't react very well to conflict or something like that. I would say like the collateral damage of going into all of this can often be, or at least for me, it's often the loss of a relationship. And if not, at the very least, is really, really, really bad burnout, where all of a sudden I lose interest in things that I was doing before, and I drop projects where I'm not performing as well. So that this could be in like an academic setting, or it could be at work, um, or like I'm right at the end of something, I'm right at the end of a project, I'm right at the end of a course, but it's just like I just can't anymore. And then I really struggle through the end stages of something and kind of do like a like job that isn't as good. So like I've done like an amazing job up until like 70% of something, and then the last 30% I'm just like, I just need to like, this just needs to end. So like I just do it for the sake of doing it. I'm not learning anymore at this point. I'm not enjoying work anymore at this point. I'm just like, okay, like this just needs to be over with. So yeah, like that's how burnout happens to me. And then I usually have to take like a few days where I'm not necessarily like off, but like I'm just like slower. Usually like I end up wanting, when I'm like really burnt out, like all I want to do is like watch television on my couch and like eat like things that I find like are comforting. which thankfully are reasonably okay. They're not like the unhealthiest thing that someone could eat, but like all of a sudden I'm having like bowls of pasta and chocolate and like and like sitting in front of the television for hours just because I just can't do anything anymore. So that's burnout to me. And week 4, because I was obsessively taking notes, I realized um, all of this mechanism of how things work for me: insecurity, anxiety, overdoing it. And that was life changing to realize that, because now I can stop myself. It's hard. Um, it takes a lot of like will and self discipline not to go into it, but I have actually been able to do it, and it's been amazing. Like my life has been a lot lighter. Okay. Um, this turned out to be a really long video, but I guess it had to be. And I will see you in the next video for week 5.